All right. Well, welcome to WorkSmart Live, everyone. Back to the future. I'm Marissa Wayman, your marketing manager over at WorkSmart. And it is sadly our last episode in the remote office series. All good things must come to an end to make room for good things. So, we are going to wrap things up today and talk about getting back to the future of business in this new day and age, whatever that happens to look like going forward, or as I've dubbed it, our virtual reality. And now I'm excited to have Clay Harris with us today, WorkSmart's president, to give us his perspective as a small business leader and to share some interesting stats that we've gathered from our clients, you guys, and his peers. And then we're going to tell you about all the new webinar series events starting here in a couple of weeks. Clay, would you like to say a quick hello?
Hello.
Awesome. All right. And I'd love to introduce you to my fabulous co-pilot, who's usually our main pilot, Don Church, our events manager.
What's up, everybody? Nice to be here, and thank you all for joining.
She's a familiar face on these webinars. If you're not, if this is your first chance to join us, she usually gets us started and runs all the things that make this thing work. And today she is helping make sure everybody can get in with some of the access issues. So yours truly. Again, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And I want to say, before we get started, a really big thank you to Durham Chamber of Commerce for coordinating with us to make this event happen and the whole remote office series to make it open and available to chamber members. All right, so enough of me. You all know I can talk forever. Let's get to the main event. Clay, I know you're ready.
Thanks, Marissa. It's a little intimidating to be on a webinar with Marissa and Dawn, who have become webinar rock stars seemingly overnight in the past few months as they've led this our great series on remote work. You know, when we were thinking about how to wrap up our remote work series and transition, you know, I think Dawn's first instinct was to call it Back to the Future, and I might have rolled my eyes a little bit and thought that that was a little bit too on the nose, but here we are in our last webinar called Back to the Future, because the more we thought about it, the more we recognized that the chaos of March and April put us all on pause, had us all just thinking in the moment, thinking about how to make the right decision today to make better outcomes for today. And as we've settled in and gotten used to this new reality, we have to be intentional about thinking what the future looks like. And so Back to the Future just works. So when you know it, experts are gonna expert. So anyway, so Marissa asked me to start today by reflecting a little bit about our experience over the past few months. And so I'm gonna start there. Before March, WorkSmart's teams were based largely in the office. Nearly all of our practices and traditions as a company were based on being together. One of our core values at WorkSmart is personal connections. So lunches, happy hours, meetings, those were all done in person. Working from home had traditionally been relegated to bad weather days. But being in North Carolina, where the threat of snow or a real hurricane will cause us to miss days of work, we learned a long time ago that we needed a good plan for those days. When our clients needed to transition to working from home, they always need more support to support that transition. So we started working on plans years ago to make sure that we could work from home, but we also had to create policies regarding remote work to ensure that clear expectations were set for our team around security, access, data management, so that they could be successful no matter where they were working from. And the plan and the policies don't enable remote work in and of themselves. So there was work to do about tools. Based on the policies and the plans that we've made, we've been working for years to migrate our tool set to be cloud enabled to enable us to work from anywhere. So that creates the capability. But even that's not enough. You can have a plan, you can have policies, and you can have the right tools. But unless you train people and let them practice, that nothing will work. But because we had all 5 elements in place, the right plan, the right policies, the right tools, training, and practice, we were able to make a quick decision in early March to start working from home. And our team was up and running in 1 day. So we're thankful we did that because our clients needed help with their own transitions. Their businesses needed to adapt quickly. And we saw a surge of interest, particularly in tools. I mentioned earlier, we had to react quickly. We had to make plans for today to put into effect today so that people could work today. And a lot of those decisions that we were helping our clients make in early and mid-March were really about tools. So we helped our clients implement traditional remote connectivity options, VPNs, remote desktop, services like Log Me In. We answered lots of questions and set up lots of different video conferencing tools for small meetings and big meetings, for telehealth and for happy hours. We also helped our clients migrate quickly to cloud-first tools, things like Microsoft 365 and hosted voice over IP to enable their communication and collaboration. And what we learned along the way is that while many of our clients already had those tools, they already had those tools available to them, but they didn't have a good plan or a good policy for how to implement them or to give good direction to their team members. Or if they had that, their team members hadn't practiced and hadn't had training. Or if they did, it was often a small subset of users who were good at it. Maybe they were the folks who spend the most time on the road, the traveling trainers or sales folks or whomever. And so the first few weeks were chaotic. As we were helping our clients make decisions around which tools to implement and why, we had for 3 weeks, a 300% increase in support calls to our help desk. And a 300% increase in service tickets is a pretty big increase for us. So I bet even Dawn and Marissa and I and everybody were help answer the phones and create tickets and all those sorts of things to make sure our folks could help our clients stay productive and secure by implementing tools, helping users learn how to use them, and do that all as quickly and securely as possible. And that was all great. I'm very proud of our team. But now that we've gotten to a place, our support calls have leveled back out to normal levels. It tells me that folks are getting used to doing what they're doing. So now we need to start planning for what's next. And we have our own opinions at WorkSmart about what next looks like for us. And we have tons of anecdotal evidence from our clients, from our interactions with them on what they're doing next. But we decided to actually survey folks. So many of you on the phone might have already may have been receiving the surveys. In early May, we started sending out a bi-weekly kind of leadership poll of our clients to better understand what they're expecting in the future. And we gained some valuable insights. In our most recent poll, 70% of the respondents indicated that more than half of their it's a tongue twister, but 70% of our clients indicated that a majority of their employees are working from home and plan on continue to working from home. In fact, more than half of our clients expect remote work to remain prevalent or more prevalent in their workplace going forward. 90% said that they had a relatively smooth experience transitioning to remote work. But almost to a person, for each respondent, had some mention of one thing that they wish had gone a little bit different or a little bit better. And an overwhelming theme in the responses were that they're really missing personal connections. And so our clients, small businesses, local, North Carolina, Georgia-based businesses, are craving kind of the best of both worlds. They want the personal connections, that in-office interaction that we've gotten used to doing over the years. And they're also seeing that work from home helps them stay productive. So what that tells us is that we've got to figure out how to do all of that a little bit better. And so we got to start thinking about what's next. And so I want to pause here and see if Marissa said it earlier. We love questions and interactive presentations. So if you guys have a question, throw it in the Q&A, and Marissa and Dawn will help throw those into the.
Clay, can you tell us a little bit more about the respondents, just the pools, or who was pooled a little bit? You said geography, but what are some of the other things that people can pull from in terms of who we surveyed?
Oh yeah, sure. So we surveyed, I think it's around 1,000 folks. I think we got around 20% response. We sent those to leadership and decision makers at our clients. So that's about two folks per client. We have somewhere around 400 clients. Most of the respondents were 50 employees or less. And all of them were based in North Carolina and Georgia. However, every once in a while, the survey would indicate that the response was coming from somewhere else because that's where their computer was at the time. But does that answer your question?
Sure does.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Other questions?
We look good for now.
Okay. So again, we want things to get back to normal, but we know that it's going to take a while, right? And it might be a long while. So what's next? So one, when we asked folks how they anticipate working from home to look in the future, is like 60% said that they thought work from home would become more prevalent, but 40% said they thought it would return to pre-COVID levels. And so there's a large swath of our clients who are going to be returning to the office. And so what I'd like to share with you now is kind of our thoughts on what a safe return to the office looks like from an IT perspective. I'll tell you a little about what we're doing from a kind of health perspective, but from an IT perspective, we urge you to be thoughtful before plugging all those laptops back into the network. Remember, they've been sitting at home next to your kid's laptop or your partner's laptop, your cell phone, every app you've ever downloaded, Pokemon and Fortnite and whatever the kids are playing these days. And so we are concerned that as those laptops return to the office, they may bring with them some malware or viruses that they would not normally have been exposed to. And so for users, especially those who are bringing laptops or tablets back into the office, we want you to urge your users to do two things before they come in. One, make sure their computer operating system has all the latest patches and updates. So check for updates, install them. Two, make sure your antivirus software is running and up to date and has done a full scan. So patches on the computer, operating system, antivirus, up to date with a full scan. These are things that our team is ready to help with. If your users don't know how to do that, they can call our help desk and they'll help them walk through that. But your users need to do that before they get to the office, not when they get there, but before. We want that computer to be as clean as possible before it comes in. On the infrastructure side, your office has probably been empty and not as many people there to make sure there aren't any beeps coming from the server room or odd heating issues. So we need to double check everything on the infrastructure side. We need to also make sure that your servers are up to date with their operating system updates and their antivirus is up to date as well. But we also want to check on the backup and the power conditioning and all of the things that are typical maintenance items that may have not been done as thoroughly while you were out of the office. So we want that server and network infrastructure to be prepared in case one of those users forgets to make sure their computer is clean and they bring it in. Because if they come in and a virus hits the network, We want the server to be well protected with patches and antivirus, but in case something goes wrong, we want a good backup as well. We want everything to be as trouble resistant as possible when folks come into the office. I'm going to take a quick pause for a sip. Those are the things that I urge you to do before you go back to the office. But once people are there, we also have an audit tool that we can run, if you'd like, against your network to make sure that all of the holes are filled, that people did the work. So we can run an audit and understand all the security risks that exist, whether it's missing patches, out-of-date antivirus, odd software that looks like malware. Ideally, these audits will be done when everyone's back in the office and their computers are there and turned on. This is something that we should coordinate together on. We should have this done on day 1 or day 2. We don't want to wait a week to get this done. It's really just a check to make sure those other 2 things happened. But we'd rather be extra careful than not. Some other things that we're doing at WorkSmart for our own phased approach to returning to the office, just to kind of give you some insight into our decision-making process. When we went to work from home in early March, we closed the office, right? The office was closed for everyone. We had a few essential workers in the office to do things like equipment receiving and shipping, and our accounting team came in occasionally to check the mail and process payments and things like that. But the office has been closed largely for 2.5 months. When North Carolina entered phase 2 back in late May, a week later, we entered phase 2 as well. And phase 2 for us meant that we took our office, looked at the space, and divided into 2 groups. And the groupings were based on kind of maintaining social distancing within the office. And so we have an A group and a B group, and they are allowed to come into the office on alternating weeks right now in phase 2. Interestingly, that's all optional. And right now, everyone is continuing to opt to work from home. There's been a few days where we have 3 or 4 people in the office, but by and large, people are not coming into the office. But it's not just our health in the office. We're also going out and visiting clients when needed. And so our teams have their disinfectant and hand sanitizer and masks for when they visit client sites. And we also had a local company here that does work in all the places where we have offices, called Get Spiffy, that came in and did a deep disinfection on our office to make sure that we didn't have anything lingering and that the office was as clean as possible. And so those are the things that we also are doing to return to the office. And of course, like you, we'll continue to actively monitor state and local announcements, and quite honestly are prepared to close the office again if the situation requires it. And so that's an important thing just to acknowledge for folks who are planning to return to the office, is that it might not be that we can be in the office and stay in the office uninterrupted. So this work from anywhere, work from home stuff that we've been talking about still applies, because we want the next transition, if we do have to close the office again, we want the next transition to be better than the first, right? But yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Before you move on from there, I'm curious if you can give us a little bit more insight on, because you mentioned that most people aren't coming into the office, and if we have if you have the tools, then why, as a business owner, would you enter into the phase to reopen the office?
For us, our decision to reopen the office was based on feedback that we got from our team that, not dissimilar from the survey, that some of them are missing the ability to go somewhere that's not home and have a quiet place to work, missing the ability to kind of have a conversation with someone not on video chat. And so our office is open, not because our work requires it. We can do just about everything remotely. But because we think our people need it and want it. Now, they're currently not coming in, but there's also not critical mass. And so we'll see how that changes over time as the public health situation evolves. But I mentioned we do surveying of our employees. We use a tool that does anonymous surveying. It's called Tiny Pulse. And one of the questions that we asked was just for feedback on how things are going. It was like an open-ended question. How are things going working remotely? And it surprised me the number of people who simply said, I miss being in the office and just having those kind of serendipitous interactions with folks that aren't planned, don't require a meeting to be scheduled, that you can just have a chat with someone while you're getting coffee, that are really hard to replicate when we're working full-time remotely.
If you aren't watching this in gallery view right now, I will just tell you that Marissa and I are both like vigorously nodding our heads. Yes, we miss people.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna tear up thinking about. I was actually anyway. All right. So, good question. Thank you. Are there other questions?
No.
No other questions. All right. I'm gonna take the opportunity to remind all the attendees that we like questions. So if you have a question, please ask it. This is a good opportunity while I take a sip of water.
Yes, because the next part of this conversation is going to start to look towards more specifically the trends, kind of things that we're going to be looking forward to the future.
Yeah, and so, I mentioned earlier our survey of clients, and 40 or so percent said that they think that they'll return to the office as normal whenever the situation allows, but 60% thought that staying remote, that remote work would be more prevalent in their workplace. And so if you're on the call, whether your transition to remote work was smooth or a bit bumpy, I encourage you now to be highly critical of your current setup, to look for improvement opportunities, right? Like now is the time to not just think about what's not working, but even the things that are working, take a critical eye to those to see how they can be better. And so I'm going to drop back to the things I talked about earlier. Do you have an overarching plan that's been communicated to your team? Do they know what your expectations are? Do they know what's allowed and what's not? Think about what's been working and what's been hard. Have a good, solid plan that's communicated to your team. Second thing, do you have the right policies in place to support your plan? The policies that you need are somewhat dependent on the industry that you're in and the type of data that you work with. Are you highly regulated? Do you have highly sensitive information? So you'd want to think about security policies, acceptable use policies, data classification or management policies. And those are all things that we can help you with. But just like I said earlier, you can have a right plan, you can have the right policies, but then you need to make sure the tools are right. What are the tools that you have that you wish you didn't have, right? What's so painful to use that you just want to delete it and never see it again? Are they do they feel secure? Are they secure? When's the last time you actually reviewed the security of your tool just from a security perspective? On the tools front, my guess is that the tools that you're using for remote access were likely put in place to support occasional remote work, not sustained remote work. And so being thoughtful about what your tool set would look like when you're doing full-time remote work is a lot different than when it's just on a bad weather day. And then finally, does your team have the right training and knowledge to succeed with any of the tools that you are going to introduce or are using already? And so when we're thinking about staying remote, I encourage you to just go through that process again: the right plan, the right policies, the right tools, the right training, and the right practice. But no matter whether you're returning to the office or continuing to work remotely, we have a number of upcoming webinars that will dive into topics to help you do all those 5 things: plan, policy, tools, train, and practice. No matter how you'll continue working, the number one IT related issue I want you to consider is cybersecurity. Number one, the bad guys are using uncertainty and changing work patterns to target your team. One of our partners is a company called Know Before. They do security awareness training. And they noted in March alone a 700% increase in phishing attempts. If you're not already providing security awareness training for your end users, I urge you to start. We've kind of all gotten used to a pretty standard set of security measures that almost every small business has these days. They have a firewall in their office, they have antivirus on their computers, and that's almost ubiquitous. We've accepted that that's like the minimum standard. I would urge you to consider that security awareness training should be a part of that bare minimum, right? Because we can protect the computer, we can protect the network, but the most susceptible target in your organization are the people. And so security awareness training helps your users identify phishing and other malware attempts themselves so that they don't fall victim to clicking on the link and giving up their credentials and things like that. So security awareness training is the top of the list for your cybersecurity priorities. But we also want you to spend more time thinking about endpoint and cloud security, right? In the past, we've relied on the physical security of the office network to provide another layer of protection that's now missing for your remote workers. If you think about your office, you have a firewall there that has a bunch of geeky stuff happening on it, like deep packet inspection and intrusion prevention and all these things that I know the words, but I'm not 100% sure what exactly they mean. But they do things and they prevent bad guys from getting in. Your users likely don't have that level of firewall protection at their house, so they're missing it. So we have to think about other ways to provide additional security on your distributed endpoints. So we have additional tools that we would recommend, like advanced antivirus. Traditional antivirus is based on definitions. So essentially, when we said earlier, update your antivirus, what that means is help your computer download all the latest virus definitions so that your antivirus software, when it sees something on your computer, it can look up the definition against the virus library and see if it matches, right? That works a lot of the time, but it's not super fast, right? It takes a while for antivirus companies to identify malware and to build the library and to download it to your computer. And so bad guys can take advantage of that gap in time. Advanced antivirus actually operates more on behaviors and actions on your computer than definitions. So it looks for suspicious activity, not just suspicious files. When you combine the two, a traditional antivirus and an advanced antivirus, you have much broader coverage and prevention of bad things happening. So we recommend advanced antivirus services on your endpoints. I mentioned earlier, if you're in a highly regulated industry or your organization deals with highly sensitive data, we also recommend 24/7 security monitoring. 20 years ago, when we started WorkSmart, we started to offer monitoring on your servers to make sure your backups worked and make sure that updates were installed automatically. And that's become pretty much a standard. All of our clients have us monitoring their infrastructure in one way or another. In recent years, folks like WorkSmart have started offering the same type of monitoring, but purely based on security. So taking events that happen on your network, comparing them to events that happen on your server and events that happen on your workstation to try to correlate all of that data to identify and quarantine bad things that happen. We call that SOC. It's a Security Operations Center. It's 24/7 security monitoring of your network. We recommend that because that can monitor not only your on-premise network, but also all of your cloud infrastructure. So we can tie all that together to understand how it's working. Next thing on security policies. I mentioned these earlier, but if you don't have security policies in place for your organization and you haven't trained your users, they have a hard time understanding how to prioritize security and productivity and all those sorts of things. Like, what's more important, that I be secure all the time or that I just get the work done? You need to define that for them and let them know what the boundaries are and then train them on it. So if I were going to say 4 things that you could do in addition to your basic antivirus and firewall, I would start with security awareness training, encourage you to look into advanced antivirus, the SOC security monitoring I talked about, and better security policies. And in fact, in the webinar series that we're wrapping up today, we had a panel discussion on those on most of those topics, and that will be available on our website shortly. Our friends from Sophos and Arctic Wolf and Herring and Bickers covered all those topics, and we're going to continue to talk about them because cybersecurity is the most important one. And so we'll keep talking about how to mitigate risks, but we're also going to introduce more information for you on multi-factor authentication, because that should really be the 5th new thing that you consider. If you're signing in to systems in the cloud, in your office, and you're not having to physically authenticate who you are, you're missing a real opportunity to keep the bad guys out, because multi-factor authentication means you need both a physical code that is on your smartphone, plus plus and your username, and that extra layer of protection goes a long way in preventing the bad guys from getting in. So we'll have a session on multi-factor authentication as well coming up. I'll take a pause here and see if folks have questions.
Clay, can you tell us some of the things that WorkSmart is doing to mitigate risk moving forward?
Sure. So I just spilled. All those things, well, I mean, you gotta drink your own Kool-Aid here. So all of the things that I just mentioned are things that we do. So WorkSmart, for years, we have known that WorkSmart is a target, right? We're a pretty rich environment. We have access to our clients' infrastructure and data and all those sorts of things. And so the bad guys would love to come and get into our network because theoretically they could spread out and see our clients. So for years, we have employed all of these tactics. We have advanced antivirus running on our systems. We have the SOC monitoring all of our cloud infrastructure and physical infrastructure. We worked with an outside consultant to develop our security policies and implement a training regime for our employees so that they all know what our expectations are. And especially over the past 2 years, we've been heavily focused on turning multi-factor authentication on as many systems as we can. I mentioned earlier that we migrated most of our tool sets to the cloud. And when we did that, we were able to take advantage of their multi-factor authentication capabilities, so that there's no system that we have now that contains client data that isn't multi-factor authenticated.
And I'd like to echo that, because, when we talk about, and thus far, when we've talked about multi-factor authentication, we've done a lot about Office or Microsoft 365 specifically, but it's important to think about it from a whole perspective of any software or any application that is accessed over the internet, because of the no longer having to require that physical access. Most of these tools already have these things built in at no additional cost. You really start to look at cost when you start talking about central management, but it's an easier thing to achieve these days. So it's just remember that it's not just Microsoft 365 to protect.
That's right. So cybersecurity would be the number one thing from an IT perspective I would pay attention to as you continue to plan for the future. But the second thing, which isn't far behind cybersecurity, is the fact that we've all taken our laptops home to make this transition easier, but that means we now have to manage a distributed infrastructure and distributed data. So the modern workplace will be cloud centric. That's a given, but our plans must include considerations for managing this distributed infrastructure and data. What is that? What do I mean by that? Traditionally, an office would have, even for, maybe especially for our small business clients, an office would have a server that does authentication and a server that helps serve files and helps connect printers and all those sorts of things. But as we move to remote work, that actually becomes a little bit cumbersome, right? So we're looking to move traditionally in-person physical infrastructure and processes to the cloud so that we can stop relying on the infrastructure in our local office. Our clients are quickly adopting Teams, OneDrive, and other Microsoft 365 services that will make your traditional file server unnecessary. We want to keep doing that. We also want to talk about services that are less common in our client footprint right now, but we think will have a real impact for them. Things like virtual desktops and Azure Active Directory. We're working towards an IT infrastructure for small business that requires zero footprint in their office space.
Is moving to the cloud a cost savings overall?
That's a good question, Marissa. There's certainly a transition from kind of the way that we've normally done on-premise infrastructure is like every 3 to 5 years, you spend some money to upgrade the server hardware and those sorts of things. Whereas cloud models are typically as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service. And the folks that do the pricing at Microsoft are pretty savvy. And so they're not walking away from one licensing model to an as a service to bring in less revenue. But there can be reduced maintenance costs and there can be easier scalability. So total cost of ownership, I would say it's cheaper to be cloud centric. But it's not going from spending, 10 grand every 4 years to spending zero. It's not going to be that significant of a savings. There will be ongoing costs associated with it. Other questions?
You also mentioned virtual desktop and some of those other tools. Can you tell us a little bit more about what virtual desktop is? I mean, we've heard VPN a lot, we've heard remote desktop services. So what exactly are we getting on a virtual desktop platform?
Sure. So for years, folks had a couple of different options, multiple options to get a desktop working in their office, right? So, or to get to work in the office when they're remote. Sometimes people just use VPN, and that allows them to have that virtual network connection back to the office where they can open files and things like that. They're typically pretty slow. Our clients are likely familiar with remote desktop or terminal services, and that relies on a fairly complex server infrastructure on the back end to serve up a desktop, but on a server. Virtual desktop is kind of this combination of virtual machines that we're all used to. So taking one big set of hardware and divvying that up and giving it to individual machines so that people can access different machines, even though it's all on the same hardware. And the thing that's happened over the past couple of years is that instead of a terminal server where essentially it's multiple people logging into the same machine at the same time, this Windows virtual desktop actually means you have your own dedicated virtual hardware for yourself. So all the issues that we've commonly associated with remote desktops or terminal servers, this gets geeky, but profile issues and issues with installing software that aren't meant to be shared amongst multiple users on the same computer go away, because a virtual desktop is really just taking your machine and putting it up in the cloud and making it accessible from anywhere. And so I'm excited because it actually solves a couple of different problems for our clients. One is, if I've got a laptop and I'm connecting to the office via VPN, it's hard to open applications that only work in the office because the VPN is so slow. Secondly, I have some problems with file sharing because that's also slow. If I'm connecting to this virtual desktop, it's like having a machine in the office, but I'm just connecting to it remotely, and all those problems go away. So my data is all stored with everyone else's data. I can open all the applications that everyone else can open. And the experience is just easier because it doesn't matter if I'm in the office, at home, at Starbucks, hopefully one day, my experience is always the same. I don't have to learn new things depending on where I'm working from. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm hearing simplicity, which I think is important.
We want to keep it simple. That's right. 100%. We want to keep it simple. That's the same thing actually with Azure Active Directory, another kind of term that I use. You know, for years we've had clients with a local server that its primary job was to authenticate users, check their username and password, make sure it was right, give them some access, maybe map a printer or two. Azure, for years, we had clients keep servers because there was no good cloud replacement for that. Azure Active Directory is Microsoft's cloud replacement for that authentication service. And acts the same whether you're in the office or not. And so again, not changing the experience when the place you're working changes makes it easier for users to focus on their work. So whether it's Teams or like virtual desktop, the other thing I'd encourage you to think about in this distributed data is your backup strategy needs to follow along. I'm worried that many of our clients haven't thoroughly thought through where and how their data is stored, backed up, and controlled. So when you're building your plan, telling people how and where data should be stored and knowing how it will be backed up is super important. We know there's like a gazillion ways to think about and use these services. So in our upcoming webinar series, we'll share our recommendations on what's most relevant to small businesses to Marissa's point, lower costs and simplify the tool set so that your team can get to work efficiently. So cybersecurity, distributed infrastructure and data. And then the third thing, communication and collaboration. You know, building a resilient team in our new virtual reality requires us to communicate and collaborate even more. One of the biggest complaints we heard over the past few months was actually related to phone systems. You know, those big, expensive pieces of equipment that have been stuck in your network closet for years. Modern phone systems are cloud first and more importantly, focused on mobility. So that just like we were talking about with the virtual desktop, whether you're in the office or at home or, you know, somewhere else, your phone works the same way that you'd expect it to be if you were sitting at the office. Desk phones are a thing of the past. We'll be sharing coming up more information on how you can use your smartphone or even Microsoft Teams to replace that phone and help your team stay connected. Speaking of Teams, Dawn and Marissa's webinars on Teams have been very popular, so we're going to run that back a couple more times and go a little bit more in depth on how we use those tools for meetings and collaboration and maintaining those personal connections. And so that'll be coming up in our webinar series. And then also we'll have a non-technical webinar. We know that the personal connection stuff is only enabled right now through technology, but it requires real intention, requires thoughtful conversation. So we invited our friends from a local consultancy called Simple Change to talk more about building healthy teams. We've used them at WorkSmart over the past few months to give our management team insight on a few different topics. You know, leading through tough times by balancing productivity and compassion was one that was really helpful for us, especially at the early part of working from home where it was super stressful. And they did another one, and they're really great about helping us have conversations with our team that are meaningful and authentic and all those sorts of things. So I'm really looking forward to their presentation. Marissa, Dawn, any questions on that? I'm sorry. I just read the thing that said, ask if there are any questions. So I asked if there are any questions.
Not on that. I do have a question for later. But
Okay. All right. So I'm going to wrap up here, but the purpose of all that, the planning, the policies, the tools, the training and the practice, the purpose of all that is to actually get it to a point where we don't have to think about that anymore, right? It just becomes the way we work so that we can actually focus on the work, not how it gets done. Providing goods and services, finding new customers, and growing when possible. And so the last webinar I'm going to preview is about opportunities. Through the years, one way WorkSmart has grown is through strategic acquisitions, and we've invited one of our clients, Viking M&A, to present their thoughts on the market opportunities that have been created in the past few months. Whether you're buying or selling, we think there's a real opportunity to kind of take advantage of how businesses are thinking right now. So, yeah, what questions do folks have, Marissa or Dawn, that you want me to answer?
Dawn,
so
you
there
got
was one sort of miscellaneous question. I don't know if Marissa, if you had other questions in your queue, but we got a question that came in. It says, has working from home changed how WorkSmart provides in-person or on-site support?
Yeah, well, working from, so what changed that was COVID. We when we went into phase one, we stopped all non-essential on-site client visits. So, there are some things that we do that just require, we can't replace your firewall or fix a server that has a hard drive that has failed remotely. There are some things that require us to go on site. So we've continued throughout to do the essential services on site, but we have other typically on-site services, whether it's our scheduled visits where we do maintenance and check up on things, or even like strategic meetings with our clients that we transitioned quickly to do remotely, and have found them to be effective, right? I was reading something somewhere that like, while they're productive and effective, they also feel like they're missing a little something, right? Because personal connections matter. So we've been able to continue, and I don't know, quite honestly, like what it'll look like 6 or 9 months from now. I imagine we'll have some clients that want to continue doing everything remotely, and we'll have some clients that want to have us back in person. And I think the name of the game will be kind of agility as we figure out what the world looks like, what's the right thing to do from a health perspective, what's the right thing to do from a maintaining personal connections perspective, I guess a physical health and a mental health perspective. So I have about as much insight into what the future looks like as anybody else, but I know that what we'll do is what works the best, whatever it is. Thank you for the question.
I have a question here about the evolution of the WorkSmart communication strategy. Personal connections has been mentioned several times throughout our webinar series. It's part of our core values. So what are things that are really winning when it comes to maintaining those personal connections?
Dawn here, our event manager, has been really working hard to figure that out, and we've had a lot of fun trying things. At WorkSmart, our webinars are a great way that we've augmented our interactions with our clients, right? I'm proud of those. Internally, we used to have quarterly staff meetings. We've been having monthly staff meetings on Zoom now just to give people quick updates. But we've also had a bunch of culture stuff. Last week, we had a spirit week where, every day was themed, and we used Teams to share photos, and there was even a gift battle. There's all sorts of fun things. One day, a few weeks ago, we normally have a barbecue this time of year, and we invite friends and family to that and have really great fun there, but we couldn't do that. So Dawn figured out a way to ship the ingredients to s'mores to everyone's house, along with a little tea light candle. And we had a lot of fun making s'mores on a Zoom call together. So, but we don't get the same, and those were great. And those are super creative and fun. But the participation isn't the same as when we do them in person, right? And so we're still trying to figure out, it might just be the case that we just have to do smaller things that are a little bit more focused on specific groups of people, and just acknowledge that we aren't going to get everybody together in a way that works when it's all remote. So we're still trying stuff out. I'd love to hear from other people what's working for them.
Yes, if we have anyone in the on the line who has any input they'd like to add, I'd like to remind folks who attended some of the events earlier on, we did a panel and we had a guest speaker talk about leadership and virtual meetings and how to get the most out of those from a personal connection standpoint. Again, that content will be available in blog as well as on our Knowledge Center, so you can grab those. Not IT related, but still really helpful in making those meaningful connections.
Sure. So I think I know that's kind of all of my content. Everything I was going to say, I would love for folks who are on the call today, or even if you watch this later, to hear from you. So when we can throw my email address up on the end of this when it gets posted or sent out, or talk on the phone and hear what you're doing. I'd love to hear your experience and what's working, not working for you guys as you work to make this successful for your organization. And I'm really excited about the upcoming webinar series. And I'm going to let Marissa or Dawn, one of them, will talk about the upcoming webinar series. It'll be Dawn. And we hope to see you all there. Thanks so much for coming today and joining us.
Yeah, so there's one last question that came in on the Q&A.
Oh, sure.
It's honestly, this is the most important question, I think. It says, do you think the mullet hairstyle is making a comeback?
I'm not sure how to take that question.
It's actually a perfect transition into our new series.
It is, ironically. All right, so I'm going to share my screen so you can see. Very, very excited about this. All right, so we've been talking about like this new series that's coming up, this like new thing that we're going to do, because we're not going to stop talking to you. We love talking to you. And our next series is called Back to the Future. So we're taking, this idea, this concept of starting to think about, you can start thinking about the future again. You can get back to thinking about what's next and planning for the future instead of being in this kind of catch-up mode. And that's going to kick off here in a couple weeks with our first event on July 9th. So we are going to kick this off with another panel because we love these panels. And we're going to invite a couple of different people in to talk about different things. So you'll have some people who are going to talk about the technology, of course, cybersecurity, communicating in the cloud, data backup and data organization and all the things. And then we're also going to have Becky from Simple Change, who Clay was talking about, as our sort of strategic connections partner. She will be joining as a panelist, and I'm really excited to hear from her. And then we have Jay from Viking Mergers and Acquisitions, who Clay was talking about as well, who will be a panelist there. So definitely sign up to join us again here in a couple of weeks. You will get a registration link tomorrow along with the recording and an email, so you can get started on that right away. And then this is just the first. This is the first episode in the new series, and there are 13 planned episodes right now in this next series, and it's going to stay weekly. So it's very exciting. So we're going to talk about cybersecurity, of course. Clay mentioned security awareness training, and we're actually going to do a very end-user friendly security awareness training as one of the episodes of the webinar, in addition to a strategic episode. And then we have a whole section of this series about communicating in the cloud. So we'll talk more about Teams. We know Teams has been very popular, so we're going to do a couple new trainings on that. We're also going to do a little bit of an end user training on OneDrive and file sharing and storage and the SharePoint and all of these things. So there's a lot of great content, all to really kind of help you think about the future of your business and this idea of digital transformation. So I hope to see you all again soon. It is 3 o'clock on the dot. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again, Clay, for your amazing insight, and Marissa for driving this thing today while I was managing some background stuff. So appreciate you both. And again, a thank you to the Chamber of Commerce, the Durham Chamber of Commerce, for making this available to all of our chamber members. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.